1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Executive Committee, and it's Friday, February 28th, 2020. And do we have any public comments? No. Okay. So I'm filling in for the chair because he's not here. So we will move on to our only action, or our only item, which is a report. So this is a fiscal 2021 performance objectives for the executive director. And the executive committee is asked to discuss performance objectives for the executive director for the period that begins July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. So does staff want to say anything?
No, except to just make a note at your dais. We have given you a proposed fiscal year 2021 strategic initiatives and priority projects. This is a document that internally we have been using to streamline some of the work efforts of our staff. So what you have from your board packet is the existing FY20 goals that were approved by the board. They wanted you to have that. That this is more of a streamlined version that we've been in our working draft, and something that you'll see coming up for the March meetings for exec committee and board that will be related to FY21 goals. You have a preview of that in case this is helpful or supportive to the conversation today.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, one of the things to note is that the previous goals and work efforts did not include anything related to the Delmar Bluffs when I read through them. And that's obviously one of the top things now, given the urgency of that project and the importance of the stabilization of the bluffs. So I might suggest that, unless anyone has a different idea of how to do this, that we offer any thoughts on performance objectives for the executive director and how they would relate to these strategic priority projects. And then staff can be taking notes and come back to us with some proposed ideas. Would you like to start, Supervisor?
Sure, I was a bit confused when I saw the performance objectives of the executive director, and then I just saw kind of a work plan. And so, to me, which even says 2020 Sandag strategic goals, when we're really discussing executive director's strategic goals. One of the things that I thought was kind of missing out of this, and kind of missing out of our discussions, is I hear that we have to meet the state requirements. I was kind of hoping through our last boards and panels that we had that we would get more of what those state requirements are. And so what I've got right now is that my understanding is we have to reduce greenhouse gases by 19%. Okay, so 19% from baseline year of 2005. So I guess what I'd like to see is our executive director kind of deliver us and bring the board and let us know what exactly are the goals that we have to meet. Now, so what were the goals in, what were the greenhouse gas emissions in 2005? What are they now? What do we have to do to meet those, so that when these projects are being brought forward in these overall goals, that we have an idea of whether we're meeting our goals or not? Because what seems to be, if we put something in there that's not in the big 5 bold moves, the pushback has been, well, we have to meet the state requirements. What are the state requirements? So I guess I would like to see part of his goals and objectives for this year is give us the mandates we have to deal with, whether VMT or the climate action plans. To me, they're kind of fuzzy. And what I'd like to see is then, okay, what are those hard goals? And I know we got other goals, but as far as reducing congestion and making sure we take care of disadvantaged communities, have a blend of transit and highways, or all those other types of goals, but we really don't have the hard goals that we have to meet. And so I'd like to see that as part of his performances, that we bring those forward, and then from that, when we're looking at these different work plan options, we know whether or not we're meeting and achieving those goals. And so to me, I would like to see that as an objective, to give us those hard number goals we have to meet. And Because right now, they're very squishy to me, and I don't know that what we've got moving forward meets. I don't know that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And in some ways, if you expand that a little bit, it's all the requirements for an NPO like Sanday. Like, we have RENA requirements, we have these other things that an organization that manages the transportation for the entire county has to do.
Yeah.
And so having those laid out and delineated clearly, is a good idea, and it also allows the board to get our arms around all the things that we're supposed to be doing. So, but I think one of the things that the goal of this is that the what, you're talking about the what. You want to have clarity on the what, and then the how is part of the executive director role. So how are we getting there? And so, what kind of things we want to be in the performance evaluation that includes the how. I think that's part of what we're trying to get at too.
Well, so,
I need to measure it.
I wanted to add something to that too. So, okay, so it needs to be the goals, the analysis of how you're going to get to that, but I think we also need to have like a check-in of, here's where we're at, and here's what we've done, and this is where we have, had a savings, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because when we just throw out numbers and it's like, oh, this is going to reduce greenhouse gases, based on what you're kind of going with. Okay, so how is it going to do that? And then have a check-in so we know if we're actually meeting that goal. I'm not into setting a goal and then not having any idea if we're actually getting anywhere near that. That doesn't
Right.
make sense to me. And then also, I've talked about this a lot. I think having a clear vision as in the cost analysis, because that's a big part of this. I think part of what we have never actually seen, and I brought this up several times, we need to have the implementation of what our goals are, right? And then also the maintenance of it, the maintenance / replacement, and then also the long-term subsidy. Because when we look at our current transportation system, I'm not sure that it can't work. The reason I think that it doesn't work is we are always having to slash our different routes because we need to maintain it and we need to replace things. And so I'm not sure. I think having like a clear vision of here's what we need to move us forward to reach our goals, I think that's a really important part of the conversation.
Mm.
So I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
Well, adding on this is that I think that something that has really never been done before is talked about our cities and the county as partners, because it seems like there's always been a lot of looking out for our own communities, but what does each community bring to the table? For instance, if we're talking about reduction or our greenhouse reduction, what is Santee doing? What is our climate action plan? What is another city? So that, because it's not really, it's hard for Sanday, in my opinion, to say, we're gonna reduce this. If everybody else around at the table is not doing their part, and not knowing what everybody's part in that puzzle is, makes it very difficult. And so I think maybe it would be important for the chair, the executive director, to be kind of more of a, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but kind of,
Collaborator?
yeah, collaborator, I'm sorry.
It's pretty early.
Bringing more collaboration to it. I'm sorry, I went dead on that thought, because I think that's gonna help us move towards, because when we all understand more about what each of our parts are, I think it's easier for the person sitting there that's saying, I want these, here's my idea. I wanna hear the ideas, not the direction, because we set the direction by policy. And, but we rely on staff to really come up with ideas, because they're the professionals. They're the engineers, the planners, the et ceteras. And that's the executive director has to bring that to us so that we understand it.
So is your comment when you're saying the cities and the counties being partners with Sandag as an agency, the way that that relates to the executive director's performance objectives, is it the interpersonal relationship between him and the agency and those jurisdictions that make it up?
I
Is
think
that
it
part
goes
of it?
a little bit beyond that, whereas, quite frankly, you know, the executive director doesn't do the work.
Right.
Usually does not do the work, I should say.
Right.
But if he sets out a clear, you know, vision for staff on, okay, where are you with meeting with cities? Oh, has anybody taken advantage of looking at our reports on greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled in their communities? Because if we're supposed to be the metropolitan planning organization and we're allowing everybody to go off on their own, just do their own thing, then there's no organization within the county.
Right, well, and it's, I feel certain that Sandag knows exactly what all the cities are doing, because the cities tell them, but then how much is that getting transferred back to you
It
and the
doesn't
board
come back to
members?
us, yeah.
Right, and so the interpersonal relationship between board members and executive director and the cities and the agency, I think, yeah, that having that be tighter is a part of a good goal.
Yeah, and somehow there has to be a better demonstration of collaboration.
Right. Okay, other comments? Do you want to say anything, Monica?
I don't disagree with anything anyone has said necessarily. I think it's good to look at metrics and no matter what we're looking at, but especially with the transportation agency, to see where we are with our goals and to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to meet those, even if they're given to us by the state and they're kind of lofty. I think though that some of it also is there is a different mentality of how we should reach those. And I think that no matter what staff does, you know, there may be that difference of opinion, and I just want to make sure we're distinguishing between that, like how we feel about how we should meet the goals and what staff is doing. Because even as an alternate, I've walked back and forth to this building many times. Every time I requested something or had an issue, staff was always there. And so while I agree big picture with what the supervisor said, I do believe that it is still sort of a give and take with our cities, our own cities, staff members, and also Sandag staff members. Like I don't see a rift in that. I truly see a rift in methodology, and so how to get through that, I think is something that we should all be dedicated to.
And what is it, methodology, can you
As
explain that a
far
little?
as, I mean, I can use the roads for an example. Some of us want roads, some don't. And that's just a policy difference. So I want to make sure we're distinguishing between kind of the collaboration of staff and just those differences that we may always have. Because staff can't change our minds about how we vote, how we view policy, what direction we think that the agency should go in. So,
Just changing the topic a little bit about thing, I think there should be a section, and I don't know where this may be captured in here, but just around what I might call organizational effectiveness in general that he would be accountable for. I don't know if he's actually the one that does the day-to-day work, but I think he is accountable, and I think it's both internal to organization, but it's also with respect to the board. And examples I would give is that the last quarter last year was incredibly frustrating, where half our board meetings got canceled, and the other half of the board meetings ran over by hours, and that's not acceptable to me. I mean, it should be, let's do a better job making sure we're having regular board meetings and planning the agendas. Another one is actually getting the agendas out on time and published, and making sure that we have the necessary amount of time to review all the material. I mean, for current feedback, I think it's been great that a lot of the supporting materials have been getting published in advance now, and not just. Well, no, I'm just saying. But prior to this year, that was never even done.
Yeah.
But at least just having all of the agendas with the staff reporters being out there on time, And those types of, effectiveness and efficiencies, I think would be very useful to actually have as a measure, because maybe then it'll start happening, and, because both those things I've been harping on for a couple of years now.
Oh, thanks.
Mary, do you want to say anything?
I got in late I'm sorry I was late. So if you can tell me just really quickly what happened before I got here.
Well, we're just talking about the performance objectives for the executive director, and then how those relate to the strategic initiatives and priority projects. So there's a printout, and there's a little bit of a difference between what's in the agenda and then what is looking forward. So we're talking about, I summarize it as both the what and the how. So what are we doing? And the supervisor made the point about having a lot more clarity about what are the requirements from the state, greenhouse gas emission requirements, and what are other requirements from the state or other places, the federal government, that we need to follow, so that we're clear on that and we really understand that as board members. And then also, how is he communicating and collaborating with the cities and the representatives?
Yeah, and to the point of, what we're required to do by the state and what the constraints that we have as a region, I think that that's really important that the supervisor brought up, because I think that we do, the reality is that we do have those constraints. The question is how is that communicated to us in a way that we're just not shut off by a statement like, well, this is the way it is, and if you don't do it this way, then you're contrary to the law. And perhaps I think that the way that you deliver those kinds of messages is a more one-on-one discussion with that particular person that may need more information in a respectful way, so that there's a good understanding. And I think that that's really the key flaw that we have here, right? Is we are constrained by certain laws, both federal and state, and so and we have to go forward in order to get funding or to be in compliance. And so, how do you communicate that in an effective and respectful way? I think that's the rub.
And I would also like the board to be presented with clear decision-making points, so that we can have discussions about places where we have options. Because I know that we all know this from our cities, that there are a lot of discretionary decisions that are made, and there are decisions made by staff all along the way, but then there are also big decisions that determine what direction we're going, and the board needs to make those. It shouldn't be a fait accompli by the time it gets to us. And that's something I think is really important.
Well, I've been at TC, Transportation Committee, we're going to be starting, we asked to get analysis of each of the different corridors, and with options then, maybe 2 or 3, whatever the, 2 or 3 different options, and then kind of you dial that in to say, well, if you, do this, then the GHG goes up, or the VMT goes down, whatever the case may be. So we're kind of, but I guess I want to know though, what are those targets that we need to meet? So I guess I would like clearer goals, and the hard numbers that we have to meet. So good, all right. And nobody denies. I don't deny that we have to meet those, but I'm still not clear on what they are, even though they've been used to say, well, that doesn't work because it doesn't meet the standards. And well, what are those?
Right.
And I think we as a board, and some of us, I don't all think the same way, which is good. But I think that's, if we can measure that what we're achieving, it's going to be easier as if just being told, no, it doesn't work, or it does.
But the good thing was the last meeting where we had that panel of the state officials coming in and really giving us some good information. And I think that what that did is it really gave us directly from those people responsible for implementing those kinds of things to come to us to speak about it, rather than us just hearing from the executive director, this is the way that it is. Having those experts come in and validate what some of us believe, or give us the opportunity for discussion about what we don't believe. I think that was a good thing.
Right, I thought so too. Did other people think that was really that was effective to have? I think in general the executive director should not be describing how modeling works. It should be people who understand it and are working in it and are technical people.
And my only frustration is I really still didn't get, you know, you have to meet
Where
this,
we
you
at?
have to meet
Where
this,
we
but
at?
what
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it?
So where are
Right.
we at?
Well, and that's, and I mentioned that earlier, you know, just knowing, we do know that we have goals, of course, but what exactly are those and where are we exactly at in this point in time? And, you know, let's not forget too, we've got all those houses that we're supposed to be building in the next 8 years, and who knows how that's actually gonna work out. So, you know, how's that going to also affect it? So, and I guess we're talking about the Department of Finance projections too today, so, you know, they have projections of how much we're gonna grow too, and we are gonna continue growing, and it's a lot to add in and figure out, and just knowing what those numbers are and how we're gonna get there, and, you know, like I said earlier, and you weren't here, is checking in on a regular basis to say, here's where we're at, and this is what we've achieved this year, just, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I think some of that is, it's described, but it's so complex and technical that it just becomes a big fuzz. And so you don't end up walking away with any bottom line, and in some ways that's, the electeds are not technical people, and we're generalists, and it needs to be explained in a way that we can understand. And so some of it is continuing to dig and summarize so that there's a bottom line.
Well, part of that is, even though we might be generalists and we're not the ones most trained, there's a great number of electeds been in their own, you know, councils
Right.
for so long now that they're sitting there saying, "What? This sounds familiar, but that doesn't sound quite the way I heard it before."
Right.
And so it creates a little bit of interest. But I think also when we talk about, you know, our constraints that are handed down from the state. I don't know, you know, if this is something that's more in your bailiwick, but I'd like to know more about meetings that have taken place with legislative offices to see about how we can mitigate some of the impacts. Because, I mean, we find out all the time that legislators mean very well. However, once the law's passed, there's suddenly these unintended consequences. And we have to work continuously on how to mitigate those. And not so much at the federal level, but you know, state level, obviously. And what are we doing to go forward with that? Because it's frustrating to sit here and be told, oh, we have to meet this goal, we have to do this, we have to do this. Well, I don't think any of us want to ever be told you have to do something, because we're all very independent and extroverted in so many ways that being told you can't or you have to doesn't always resonate well. And even though we know, at least intellectually, that what that means is there's a mandate. But how can we fix some of the unintended consequences is maybe a focus that we should have also. And I think that if Hassan is working as well throughout the state as many of us tend to see or hear about even, then maybe there should be more information, more work being done, and maybe there already is, but we just don't know. And how can we add to that by talking with legislators at the state level? Because I know they like to hear from us at our level, because sometimes they don't know. I mean, you get the white paper in front of you, and you're going, how does this really affect the municipalities? Sometimes you don't, it's not clear.
I think, and also working through those things, like in the committee structures and here at executives, so, because, I mean, my experience also from things like RENA is that you don't have one meeting about it and then just get it. It's like, it's this layering of understanding what is the state requiring and how are the jurisdictions able to meet it, and there's a lot of complexity in how to meet it. And the greenhouse gas reduction requirements, I think, are quite similar, where you know, you have to just continue to dig in it and work on it. So having that happen in the committees effectively and not have those canceled and be able to look at what the different options are I think would help us get there. Okay, do you want to start?
Well,
with
just I'm just kind of finding some of those notes that we talked. You know, I'm pushing for more defined goals, but I also heard that we need more options and analysis. But we also have to kind of be brought to a consensus so that once a regional transportation plan is brought forward, it's something we can all buy into. And I think that's kind of the main objective and goal, so that I'd hate to see a weighted vote for the regional plan. So, and that's where we are today, I think. So I think we need to have some, and I know it's not entirely up to him, but I think he needs to be more of a consensus builder towards getting us towards, and when that regional plan comes out, so that it's something we can buy into, we trust, we understand, and so I guess I'd add consensus, I guess, here to one of the performance objectives would be a
I think
consensus
that's a
builder.
great idea, yeah.
Yeah, I think also, my experience on some other boards, I'm on some wastewater boards where ideologically the board is split, but we work through things, and the general manager does a really good job of having workshops and having everybody really understand where things are. And so even at the end, when there's a split vote and it ends up going a direction that not every single person wanted to, you still really understand what's happening and felt like your input mattered. And I'm someone who's on the side that's sometimes not winning, but I feel okay about it because I feel like the process is solid and legitimate and is the way it's supposed to work in the ideal system. And in some ways, there's a lot of hard work that goes into the foundation.
Sometimes you feel like at least some of your input was added in.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely feel that way. I feel like the questions and the conversations affected the direction, even if it's ultimately a yes on something instead of a no. And that, I think that's part of what it means to be a healthy organization.
Well, yeah, you have to have two voices, obviously, at a
Yeah.
table to really, and it is about negotiation, honestly.
Right.
And, back to what the supervisor had said, it's true when we come to a consensus and then it goes to a weighted vote, that just kind of defeats the purpose. And I think Bill Wells had said, oh yeah, why sit here for 3 hours and then it ends up going to a weighted vote. I mean, I think Hassan's objective is to try to figure out how to not have a weighted vote so that we can all at least, feel like we have a voice at the table. And like when it came to RENA, a lot of the smaller cities, I think they felt very disenfranchised too. And I can tell you the citizens in San Marcos were like, wait, what's going on? I didn't think that that's how it was going to go because based on what was happening. And so I think just trying to figure out how to bring us all together and have two voices all melded together and one voice at the end. Back to supervisor's comment of a consensus at the end. And everyone feels like they're part of the plan. Because then you have buy-in and then everyone can go out and tout it. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Anything else?
So where does it go from here? What's next?
I think hopefully, staff can present us with something that seems to capture all these different comments and we can modify it and review it and talk about it again. So, do anyone see a different way that would go better?
Could staff kind of summarize what they heard?
Right now?
I think we should let.
She's
There are a lot of
there.
notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should
All right.
several of them.
Okay.
Yeah, let
She's
them
taking
work
a
on
lot of
it.
notes.
Maybe send that out, like you send out a draft and then we can all look at it and make sure everything's captured that we wanted to.
I mean, I think part of it is to roll it into an actual document
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could be, and I'm sure it will be somewhat based on Gary's contract and other contracts from other people, I don't know who, but so that, it's something that we can work with in writing.
And relative to there's been a lot of talk about the ultimate objectives, and since I had to step out for a second, I apologize for that. I don't know if there's any talk, to me, just as important as hitting and understanding the goals and hitting interim milestones as well. So I don't know if that was captured, but, it's not, do we have a regional plan that has consensus that's been delivered on time? It's like, did we actually go through a robust process and hit intermediate milestones and actually publish those milestones and saying, this is where we're gonna be at this particular point in time, and making sure that, we don't run into this, oh, it's now January of 2021, let's just approve the regional plan because we gotta do it.
Right.
So, making sure we actually get to the milestones along the way.
Yeah. And I just want to respond to one point. I think it's important that we not cancel meetings when we have a lot of stuff to be dealing with. but when meetings run over, I mean, we all know that a lot of times that's the amount of board comment, and then also public comment can't always be controlled, and so I do sit next to the chair, and I think he's trying really hard to keep it on time, but sometimes it also just takes everybody to say, hey, if we want to end at noon, we all have to be really concise.
Well, City of San Diego has a 5-minute clock for us.
Oh, really? Wow.
A 5-minute clock for each person
And
to
if we
speak.
need more time, I mean, we could go over, but we would have to add, normally another council member gives us more of their time.
Uh-huh. But see, if
I-
everybody spoke for 5 minutes, it would be more than an hour of
Yeah, but they speak for more than that right now sometimes.
Be there now.
A lot of people speak more than 5 minutes.
Maybe it should be a 2-minute clock.
Yeah.
With
No,
21
it's just-
board members, I mean, versus your much smaller group, you know?
And sometimes we get surprised, but most of the times the contentious, long-winded topics are known. We should clear the agenda. We've done that once already. We weren't doing it last fall. I think clear the agenda, put those on the next one, right? And I mean, there may be other time-sensitive stuff, but normally we spend an hour dilly-dallying around just all the executive director's report and the other things that are on the agenda that you can go through pretty quickly. But yeah, there will be times that we run long just because a lot of people like to talk a lot.
Right.
Speaking of which,
I don't think I'm one of the guilty parties, sorry.
no, I'll take that hit. I'm too often. One of the things in here that kind of gives me pause is that under the regional planning portion, I know I'm not on regional planning, but one of the things in here, it's a sentence that says, emphasize the need to envision a balanced transportation system that can be achieved through implementation of the 5 big moves. I don't know that we vetted the 5 big moves or that they really work or not, but yet we're saying the transportation system is going to be achieved through implementation of it. I think that's still to be determined as opposed to being a statement.
Do you think the 5 big moves is really, at the moment, is so broad that you can modify what's inside of it? But to say that it's going through the system of the next iOS and transit leave, I mean, you're not really, those are such aspirational large statements that to me the 5 big moves, you're not boxed into any corner with that. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
you're
there's some specific projects that are listed in there that I don't like. Anyway, I think it still needs to be vetted, and these types of statements maybe should be avoided, to where we're still looking at, and we're still, we haven't seen the big vision yet for the 5 big moves.
But what has so, because I'm an alternate,
It's okay.
sorry about the question, but what has the board actually approved?
We
So has
actually-
the board approved a concept, or what have you?
I think we approved a concept. I mean,
So I
that's
think
my,
maybe that's from that.
didn't we?
Sure would be nice if we were clear on that, wouldn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, but you have to, we can go back to the minutes and see what the board approved, because I'm
well,
sure this is a
I think
reflection.
the supervisor's point, I mean, we really haven't approved a total program yet.
An
I mean, it has not-
implementation
Right.
for.
We don't even know
We
how much
don't
it's
know
gonna
what it
cost. I mean,
is,
like,
yeah.
literally, we've seen zero analysis, we've seen $0 amounts, like, we haven't really approved anything like that.
But what has the board approved?
Well, I think they're talking
believe-
about
The overall
I believe it's a
concept.
direction.
The overall
I believe it's a
concept,
direction
yeah.
to follow through and bring us the plan, but we haven't approved the plan, actually, so that's my spot.
Where's the reference?
Well, I'm sorry, whatever, page
Uh,
2, on the, where it says, the top of it says 2020 Sanday goals, areas of emphasis.
Okay.
It was one that I
Last,
already.
last paragraph, middle of it, starts with emphasize.
Yeah, remember that discussion about priority corridors? It was
Yeah.
a long discussion, and that was underneath the,
Well, I wanted, the second point on this
complete
was,
corridors.
I want,
Yeah.
I want not just the 5 big moves, but including the board-approved priority corridor, freeway corridors as well. The prioritized freeway corridors that we put in there, they seem to be dropped off of the 5 big moves, because that is actually what we approved.
They were approved together.
Yes, and so those kind of get dropped off. But I don't know, I'm beating some that's too far down in the weeds. But, statements like this kind of make me go, when did we vote on that? How did we, why is this being put forward? It's like, why is an MOU with the Navy going on? This kind of falls in
Getting out
that,
ahead.
in those lines of, well, through implementation of the 5 big moves. So 5 big moves is a concept. I don't know that it's something that's being implemented. But, so anyway, I'll shut up.
But you also, you want statements to mean something, you know, like, so if it says, through implementation of best practices in the transportation sector,
Yeah, okay.
it's like, is that better? I mean, it
I don't
seems like
think so.
since, if we've already, as a board, approved the broad concepts of these 5 big moves, complete corridor, transit, elite, mobility hubs, flexible fleets, next.os, I mean, it just doesn't seem that controversial to put that into the statement. I mean, I don't wanna get into a tit for tat.
Maybe if you put in the first 3 words, upon board approval, comma, emphasize.
But we're already on separate sides of what that is, though, even in this meeting.
No, but what I'd like to see is the board weigh in.
Do you think the
more.
board hasn't approved it? Do you feel like we
The-
haven't?
I don't think we've approved the implementation of it.
Right.
So if we
Right.
went another way, then I think this document might reflect that. I
I
honestly
know.
think
And
it's
this
from where
is-
we are.
But what I don't want is have say, well, you voted on this. It's like, ugh.
Right.
So,
Well, what do you
I
think?
mean, but we gave direction that we agreed that the concept of the 5 big moves was something that we wanted to aspire to. But as far as particular projects that are being identified within the 5 big moves, we haven't done that.
Right.
And I
This
think
is a
that-
strategic
that-
goals.
That's where
This
you
is a
get to the
strategic
point
goals
of,
document.
when you're asking
It's not
about
a
how
goal
much
document.
is this gonna cost, you don't know how much it's gonna cost until you get down to the project level.
Right.
And we're not down to the project level.
Right.
But neither is
I
this
agree.
document. This is a strategic goals broad document.
Well, it
Okay.
doesn't say the concept, it's calling it, it's saying the implementation.
I think that's splitting hairs, but I will shut up too. I will follow the supervisor.
I agree 100%, like with Mary, I mean, this is a concept that we've approved. We haven't actually approved the program, so when we're talking about implementing something that we haven't even approved yet, it
So when
seems a
you're
little
talking
bit
about
hard for
complete
them.
corridors,
Yeah.
that includes the possibility of the projects that Jim has in mind. It may be that, it may not be that, but it's within the, you know, the definition of complete corridors.
Well, we named
Is-
4.
Yeah, well, but,
In that.
yeah. So, so that's, I think that we're kind of at like the EIR, phase, and then you have to get into the specific plans, right? And we're not there yet.
Okay.
So how would you suggest, Mary, that we word this?
I think that
I
that's,
don't need,
and
I don't
I
need to
think
change
that
it.
that's what
It's just pointing out.
staff is modeling now, right? Is how do you achieve those concepts? And then the projects come forward.
In that context, I think it's worded fine. It's worded fine that this is a marketing thing. It's a marketing saying, hey, we're gonna do this great thing called 5 big moves. And it's up to this board to define exactly what constitutes the actual implementation of those 5 big moves. So maybe we could disagree that, yeah, we don't wanna implement the 5 big moves, but that's arguing over nothing in my mind.
Well, we
It's
don't-
arguing
yeah.
over it's arguing over a concept that we've already approved, but we will be approving as a board what is the exact implementation of those 5 big moves, even though we're out there saying, yes, we're gonna implement these things without having the definition in front of it yet. And I don't see the problem in that, in the sense that all we're doing is getting people excited about stuff at this point.
Could we add something like as yet to be finalized, or as
just-
finalized by the board, or,
We'll
I
just
don't
leave it
know.
alone. It's just, I guess what I'm
But I get
frustrated
your point.
sometimes
Yeah.
with it appears that this entity gets ahead of its board.
Right.
I think you have some good examples of that.
Yeah.
I don't think this is one of
Yeah,
them, but
I
I think
think
you
that's
have some,
true.
I think you
All
have
right.
some good examples of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, and what about more communication about things like an MOU for the Navy, like memos that say, this is what I'm doing this week, or just to FYI, to let us know and communicate about what's happening in terms of the operational side too.
100%, yeah. You know, we have, I don't know if this is possible, maybe Mr. Kirk could weigh in on this. We actually have like a newsletter that comes out to our council that gives us an update on things that are happening. I don't know, and it comes out every week. I don't know if that's something.
There's
that-
not a problem with a one-way communication between the
Yes.
executive director and you as a board. What you can have is a collective concurrence of you then discussing that and moving toward a decision based on items in that.
Yeah, we don't have that. It's literally a one-way communication, comes out every Friday, except for the weeks that we are closed on Fridays, so it comes out on Thursday. But it's essentially, this is what's happening This is an update on things that are ongoing, and it's just really simple. You look at it, and if you don't read it, then you're not updated, and that's your problem. It's on you.
Right.
But, you know, and I admit sometimes, you know, like I'll go, oh shoot, I didn't read that last week. And I'll go, well, that's my bad, right? I think it's important that we do have something like that. So I would be totally open for us
Right.
to have something like that.
But that doesn't give permission to go ahead and do something
No,
without
no.
board's permission or
Right.
board
Right.
way on certain things.
This is just on the more communication
Monday,
that's
the day-to-day.
clear and
Yeah,
and
that's-
also keeps us informed about what is happening with this huge
Nothing is
agency.
worse than reading it in the newspaper and you go, oh shoot, I didn't know that. That's terrible. So I think just for communication, but again, signing something like an MOU, I don't think that should ever be something that we read about in the newspaper. It's not okay. So I don't know.
You know, one thing we do at our city is, the city manager sends out a list of about the next 5 or 6 meetings projected, and the items that are expected to come before council, and,
That's part of our newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's called the Forward Council Agenda, and it talks about like 3 months ahead, here's what's gonna be on the agenda. And sometimes things are flexible, they'll say, may change the date on something, but at least we know if we're doing
Right.
our part of it, right?
Right.
We know what's going on.
Right.
So.
Ours is like a draft just to not violate the Brown Act, but we do get that sometimes from the council president. Just an outlook for the next
I mean,
2
if you
months.
see a couple, 3 meetings ahead or whatever, and it says, you know, we're gonna be passing out peanuts to the crowd, you know, I wanna weigh in and say, well, you know, I think we have some allergy issues here, instead of waiting until the day and we've already purchased all the peanuts. I know that's a silly example, but it's,
I like that
Clear, yeah, it's
example.
clear, it's clear.
Okay.
count on me for silly.
Anything else? This was really our main item today. So we'll just leave you with that, and then we'll come back with something and we can talk about it more. So we have no continued public comments, and then our upcoming meeting is of the executive committee is scheduled for Friday, March 13 at 8 a.m. and is held at the VA House Resort. So this is at our retreat, which is in Alpine. So with that,
Yeah, another meeting out of town.
we're adjourned. It's still in the county.